Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome again to one more live session here with a bunch of great people. My name is Felipe. With me, I have a few guests here. From the top left, we have, or actually the top right, we have Gabriel. Hey, Gabriel, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Felipe?
I'm doing great. We have now on the bottom left, Peter Wiggins. Hey, Peter.
Hello.
And last but not least, on the bottom right, we have Patrick. Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Doing great. How are you, Felipe?
Great. So we are all here together to talk about an event that I think all of us have attended already. No, I'm 100% sure. And that is the Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit. Today, the dates are coming out. So, Peter, you know a little bit more about that than the rest of us.
I do know a little bit more, you're correct. And it's been an interesting couple of days because there was a slight hiccup. But the news is it's going to be in November, and it's highly likely it's going to be between the 8th to the 10th. Now, when I say highly likely, there is a possibility that it might be the 15th to the 17th, but it's looking as if it's going to be the 8th to the 10th. So I wouldn't book a ticket as in jumping on a plane. However, I've been told that the registration for the event is open or should be open very shortly. But for me, I'm really pleased because if you're involved with Final Cut Pro 10, it is the best event of the year to go to.
Okay, fantastic. Patrick, you have been there before. What are your feelings about the Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit?
I mean, in general, my feelings about the summit are that it's kind of like a large family reunion in many ways. You know, a lot of us have already interacted online, been in the forums, been on the FCP.co comments section, or in various Facebook groups or on Twitter. And so being able to see everybody's face and get to hang out and enjoy each other's company is great. And it's also been a really interesting experience getting to hear from Apple directly in terms of their feelings about Final Cut Pro 10 and where it's headed. And, they don't really give us that much information about where it's headed. But it has been cool. We have in the past been privy to some interesting information that hadn't been leaked out to the rest of the world. And then immediately during the event, after we get to see it, then the press gets to know about it, and that information gets out. So it's kind of like WWDC except for just Final Cut Pro 10, which is kind of exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really not bad. Gabriel, I have been there on 2016. That's when I met Patrick Southern for the first time.
Yeah.
And I also I actually don't know, Peter, were you there in 2016?
I've been to everyone apart from the last one. There you go.
All right.
So yes, I was there at I was there at the first one. I think the first one was in San Jose, wasn't it?
I actually don't know because I was in 2016 and I don't. It was in Cupertino already. In the Juniper.
Yeah, so it started off in San Jose in the same place they had WWDC because obviously I was there a couple of weeks ago for the Mac Pro launch, etc. And then it moved to. Did I mention that? Yeah, and then it moved to Cupertino, and we were in the Juniper Hotel. Now, I mean, as for location, I believe it's in the San Jose stroke Cupertino area, and I don't think that's been finalised. So I think, if you're looking forward to booking flights and everything like that, obviously the date's still fluid, but I think, San Jose is probably a good destination airport because Cupertino and San Jose are obviously quite close. And you don't want to go to San Francisco and get a long drive or whatever like you did, Felipe.
Well, that's the other thing that I wanted to tell people. So just repeating for those that weren't connected when we said, dates at the moment from the 8th to the 10th of November. They might change still to the 16th to 18th. Is that correct?
15th to 17th. I think that's the next Friday.
15th to 17th. So,
yeah, it's the next Friday to Sunday.
Yeah, so in terms of booking flights, I would say if you're able to do a reservation and not pay for it or pay a very little amount, maybe that's a good time. I was checking flights from London to San Jose. very cheap. But yeah, very important is to San Jose and not to San Francisco. Don't make the mistake that I made in 2016, that I flew to San Francisco and took an Uber for more than an hour to get to Cupertino, and then you're not gonna like very much to pay that much money, you know, and waste that much time. Now I think
then you got it back the other way as well.
Yes, I had to, unfortunately. So it wasn't a very happy thing, but at that time, the company that I was working for paid for everything. Yeah. So it wasn't that painful in terms of in my pocket, but it was definitely painful to have paid that much. Gabriel, you're super white. I'm super afraid of moving to your screen. We can see that your iMac.
My Blackmagic camera on a full 170 some watt hour charged battery just died.
Well, she got shy. But since you're on camera right now, looking like a ghost, we're gonna
Welcome.
Maybe you can decrease the brightness on your monitor or something like that.
It's down all the way. That's just my skin, man.
Wow. Okay, guys, this is Vampire Gabriel.
It's Gabriel the friendly ghost.
Yeah.
Most days. Yeah.
So Gabe, you've been there in 2017, right?
Yes, and that's where I met Patrick. Well, everybody except for you.
Yeah, so it's just a shame, right? We do a podcast together when we haven't met, and both of us have been to Creative Summit, but in different years.
Yes.
Several times you told me the reasons why you go to the Creative Summit, and I would like to see if you can share with everyone those reasons why you think the Creative Summit is an interesting event to attend.
Oh, well, what's interesting to me is that Final Cut 10 is just a tool, but that there are so many people this passionate about a tool that they want to come together and hang out and talk about that tool is just an interesting phenomenon for me. And no matter what area of the industry you work in, you're going to find somebody else there in that area, as well as every other area to learn from. And they're all extremely open and welcoming and wanting to share what they've learned and their tips and their tricks. And speaking of tips and tricks, you'll learn those in the sessions, but I think the beautiful part about it is what goes on outside the sessions. It's all the time in between and, in the mornings and later at night when you get together. It's just a really wonderful community, and I'm really hoping I can go this year. Plus, it would be nice to meet you, finally.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole point where what I'm trying to raise here is it a good event to go to?
It's terrible.
It's terrible, right?
Yeah. Yes, you should go.
I think if you look back at the previous years, there's a bit of a pattern with releases of hardware and software. So I think last year, correct me if I'm wrong, they announced 10.4. Would it have been 10.4 on the Friday, or was it the Thursday?
They announced, but they didn't release, right?
You couldn't download it until the Monday. So it was it was announced, but you couldn't download it. But they showed it. They showed it. Bear in mind, I didn't go to the last one. So and then also it's been, you get to see. I can remember us seeing the iMac Pro there working with everything. It was the first time we'd seen it really working stuff. Now, I'm not a betting man, but I'd like to put quite a bit of money on the fact that you're going to see Final Cut Pro 10 running on a Mac Pro. Now, whether it's 10.4 point whatever or 10.5, I really don't know.
Numbers at this point is marketing.
Yeah, I would say that you are going to see the whole setup running.
Now, Patrick, we were there in 2016. That's when they released 10.2, and I remember 10.2 was released the day before the summit started, or the day the summit started, or something like that. I remember everyone going crazy to their rooms, and I remember that when we were getting to the bus to go to the Apple campus, which is again another reason why you might want to go to the Creative Summit, is there are visits to the Apple campus. I don't know if it's going to be the old one at One Infinite Loop, or if it's going to be the spaceship one this year. It would be nice once we hear from FMC. But I remember Patrick reading the release notes from 10.2 in the bus and going crazy, like, oh my god, yeah, this and that, and then start like that little brainstorm of what things would be possible to do with all those releases. And we actually have a couple of people watching here. We have Marcelo Ferraz from Brazil. We have Eugene Larin from Ukraine. We have Michael Flotron. I think he's speaking from the United States. Marcelo was saying here he's hoping that he can go again. It was a great event. The keynotes were so good. Had a blast visiting Apple and talking to all the other editors during the trivia night. So you guys had a trivia night last year. I did not have in
There was a
2016.
trivia night.
Yeah, so I think
I
the event is evolving.
I can own up to setting some of the questions on that with Jeff. And well, I've got a bit of a message from Jeff because we really tried to get him on this chat because he knows what's going on. He knows much more than we do, and he's the actual guy who sets up the grid of there are 3 rooms that start at 9 a.m. and it's like an hour and a half sessions, and you can pick which one you want to go to. Then you have a bit of lunch, and then it's back in the afternoon for more sessions. But he wanted to do this, but he's actually working for a client today, so he sends his apologies because I would have really liked to kind of trying to got a bit more information out of him. But he couldn't make it. But there you go.
Well, there we go. The other comments here, just to finish, Michael Flutterin, he said that he has never been, but I think he's planning to do a drive all the way there. Michael, where are you driving from, by the way?
I was going to say lives in the States, probably.
Yes, and he's hoping for custom proxy encode settings, and so am I. That's
nice.
Not only that, but a custom, like when you have media location to put it on the library, I'm hoping for a proxy location, so that you can separate original media from proxy. So let's see. And Damasta is saying it will not be 10.5.
Oh, okay.
Wow, I'm interested now to think why he's saying that's not going to be a 10.5. At this point, I think numbers are a marketing term. In the programming world, they are not. The first point after the first number tends to be a major release, and after the second point, the third number tends to be bug fixes and small fixes. But honestly,
have we ever had 10 iterations of X before we get to the next? Are we going to have a 4.7, 4.8? Are they just going to jump right to 10.5?
It's all
That's
marketing.
what I think.
Like it's however they feel like putting the number. Maybe this can be 10.7. So let's put 10.7.
I just think it's dependent on the features, really, because if it's a few updates and the bits and pieces and something does this and we've incorporated this from Motion or whatever, then it's not going to make a 10.5. 10.5, if it comes out, it's got to have kind of some new features. We would all love collaboration. We'd all love proxy custom proxies, and even dupe detection, because I know there's no podcast or live show anywhere that talks about Final Cut Pro 10 that doesn't mention dupe detection. So there you go. Thought I'd get it.
I've sent in that feature request just for Sean Lander. Is it?
Yeah,
Leander?
yeah.
Who I've never met, and I've never needed it, but I've requested it just for him.
So I would think it depends on the size of the update. If there's new features, considerable new features, like we had color correct, the curves and everything, that warrants 10.4.
Well, 10.3 was magnetic timeline 2, wasn't it? So that was a pretty big.
And rolls.
We got rolls.
10.3, they completely revamped the audio engine. Yeah, the way that audio was handled in Final Cut was completely rewritten, I think. It'll be really interesting. I'm excited to see what happens. But the thing that I think is really interesting is that they've already announced a number of things that are coming to Final Cut on their website. If you go to apple.com/Final Cut Pro, Final-Cut-Pro, there are a number of things that are coming this fall, including accelerated performance with Metal, optimized for the all-new Mac Pro, which it goes into detail. Detection? Well, it doesn't say dupe detection. So, HDR on Pro Display XDR. So
that's
like
the point
there are some
from the master, really. He's like, it will only be meta optimization, which I would correct and say that's the only information that during WWDC they said that will be coming So that's the only thing that right now is worth ahead of time to say what's coming with 10.5. I wouldn't say that that's the only thing that's coming, mainly because when you really pixel peep into the screenshot of Final Cut Pro 10 on the page, you can
see
find
the
a few
color
interesting
masking.
things. Yeah, there are other things that are coming. So it's not impossible that there would be mask tracking being built into Final Cut Pro 10. They've had that patent for a very long time based on AI. There are a lot of things. So at the moment, we know of one thing that will be full metal implementation, right? Patrick, sorry to interrupt. You can keep going with HDR and the XDR monitors.
No, that was it. That's it on this.
You can continue. That's it.
To be fair, that's what they were showing at WWDC. So
I can say one more thing.
Well,
during the WWDC sessions, there was a session called How to Optimize Applications for Metal. And during that session, they're mentioning what Metal does, what the current version going on forward does from Metal. And it manages processes and tasks in parallel between CPU and GPU. So it's not anymore just GPU. So if you're sending a task to be processed, it's going to split between CPUs and GPUs. And that, of course, it's not that unnecessarily automatically, but it needs some programming to happen that. Now, having said that, the other thing that they did in the same session was to talk about HDR and how macOS Catalina is working with HDR. And in very broad, simplified terms, think of standard definition. Standard dynamic range. We have up to 100 nits. Correct? Everyone check?
Mm-hmm.
Up to 100 nits, that's the legal one for broadcast, standard dynamic range. They are allocating 200 nits. So maybe you want to see that standard dynamic range twice as bright on your monitor. So they're reserving 200 nits of your monitor for standard dynamic range. Everything else that your monitor can display, which is what they call in the extended dynamic range in their line of monitors, they're gonna do tone mapping for HDR. So let's say that you have something that was finished and there is a total of 2,000 nits. Up to 200 is the standard dynamic range. Between 200 and 2,000 nits, they're gonna tone map for the rest of brightness that your monitor can display, which will also depend on the level of brightness that you have set at that point in time. So,
yeah, because even the XDR display only goes up to 1,600 nits, and that's not even it's only 1,000 sustained.
Only,
you say
only.
only 1,000.
Well,
I was going to say there's not any
not
other
only,
monitor on the there's not any other monitor on the market, not even the $40,000 monitors right now that will do full screen 1,000 nits sustained. There are monitors that'll do peak 1,000 nits, and there are monitors that'll do a little bit over 1,000 nits, but there's no monitor that'll do 1,000 nits full screen, and especially not sustained. They'll actually dim the rest of the image. Felipe, I watched that same presentation you were talking about, and something that I thought was interesting was that 200 nit reservation for standard dynamic range and up to 1,000 nits for HDR content. That's a sliding scale, they were saying.
Yes,
so depending on how bright your screen is,
and
what
even
is
the
reserved
ambient
for standard
light.
dynamic range and how much is reserved for HDR changes. So you're actually changing in a way, the dynamic range of your monitor by changing the brightness of your monitor.
Yeah, so for example, these IMAX 5K, they go to, if I'm not mistaken, 500 or 600 nits, right?
500 nits.
Yeah, so if you're not seeing HDR. That's the first thing, but it's tone mapped.
No.
Hello, kids.
Hi.
Guys, have you ever seen that video that there is someone being interviewed at the BBC and then there are people walking around?
Exactly the same. Although my wife wasn't running and grabbing her.
What is it with the BBC and children interrupting? I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, Felipe, I think it's worth noting that there are HDR televisions on the market that only go up to like a peak brightness of around 700 nits.
Mine goes even lower, I think. I think mine is 600 something.
Yeah, so So the fact that we've got a 500 nit display, um, sure, we say that 1000 nits is kind of the standard for HDR, but I think that we can certainly have something that is better than SDR on these 500 nit displays with this new tone mapping technology that you were talking about that they're bringing to Metal and Catalina. So that'll be really exciting to see. And I'm really excited too with the Pro Display XDR, how the interface, I don't know if you guys have worked with HDR in Final Cut right now, but the viewer is stuck to SDR. So if you're working in HDR content, you have to have an outboard monitor to be able to actually see what results you're getting. Mm-hmm. However, it sounds like, according to the website, here, let's actually read what it says. View high dynamic range video the way it was meant to be seen. The gorgeous new Pro Display XDR delivers 6K resolution and 1000 nits of sustained brightness for HDR editing, grading, and delivery with Final Cut. And setup couldn't be simpler. Just connect a single Thunderbolt cable. Oh, it doesn't say. It just says HDR and Pro Display XDR. But then they've got a picture of the viewer up, which to me says, and this is educated guess based off of experience with the current version of Final Cut. They're calling this out as HDR and Pro Display XDR because of the fact that the viewer, I believe, they're saying that the viewer will now have HDR capabilities. So if you're on 500 nits, hopefully they'll use that same Metal framework technology so that we're getting that sliding scale of HDR content in the viewer while everything else stays SDR, so we don't get blinded by all of the really bright thumbnails in the browser.
Yeah, I think in one of the sessions from WWDC, they actually said exactly that the viewer would be showing HDR while the rest of the interface would be standard dynamic range, as we are already used to. Michael Fluttering was saying that he's going to drive from Los Angeles, so maybe he goes together with Patrick. Stephen Doyle. Anyone knows Stephen Doyle? Have you guys come across him? He has been there and last year. And he's looking forward to come back again. And the Master, yes, mentioned the same things, and the HDR feature that's going to be OS level, which that means one thing, guys.
What does that mean?
Goodbye Blackmagic boxes, goodbye AJE boxes to output HDR. We're not going to need
not necessarily.
that. Not necessarily. Of course, if you already have it, you're not going to throw them in the trash. But I imagine that with a Thunderbolt 3 or USB 3 to HDMI 2, macOS will be passing on the HDR tags, and you're going to be able to connect directly to a monitor.
That's something I wanted to ask Patrick, because if I have a 500 nit and Catalina is able to tone map, so I can sort of have a poor man's HDR.
Sure.
It's still, I'm not actually grading HDR though, because I don't know anybody who has a display that can go up to 1000 nits are going to be able to see things I couldn't critically evaluate because I couldn't see that while I was grading. So it's like just a kind of a stepping stone, right?
Yeah, that would still not be a proper reference monitor. And the thing, so we've actually recently, I spent like 4 hours testing the other day because working on this feature, the director wants to, for whatever reason, watch on this big 50 some odd inch TV that we've got. And so we were trying to get a signal to it. And this is just for SDR. And when we were doing HDMI out, we actually saw our performance drop in Final Cut Pro overall because now graphics resources from the computer are being used to send out the signal to the display. And even with a video I/O box, there is that to a certain degree. However, whenever we used a Blackmagic or AJE box to output the signal, then we had less performance issues. There were still performance issues, and there are still frame sync issues unless you've got the audio coming out of the same device. And then some devices only output audio when you're playing back in the timeline, and they won't in the viewer. So there's all sorts of weirdness.
I can fix that.
Yeah, how do you fix that?
Oh, there you go. You have to go into the MIDI settings and adjust the speaker outputs for mono.
To mono?
When a mono source is, it'll play them through stereo speakers.
Oh, interesting.
So I'll put the tech support bill in for you.
Now, the master was saying the AJE Box does 12-bit. But someone please correct me. Which monitor displays that?
I don't know that there are any that are on the market that do.
Like I'm saying, you're probably not going to throw those boxes away. And you're probably going to continue using them even after Catalina, pretty sure. But people
for your reference monitors.
Yes.
Specifically for proper broadcast reference monitors.
Yes.
Well, if you think about broadcast, the majority of broadcast in the UK is still interlaced, and you're not going to get an interlaced signal on one of those XDR monitors, as lovely as they are. So you're going to have something hanging off it, whether it's kind of, you've got something that it outputs to as you check for interlacing, and then you use the XDR as you work on that screen or whatever. But I think for certainly the stuff I do, I'm going to have one of those boxes sitting next to a Mac for or a card in the machine for a while, because if you think about the current Mac Pro, the trash can, you put an HDMI cable in that doesn't do interlaced. That only does progressive because it's like another desktop. So I think we're eventually going to go 50p, UHD 50p, which will be fine. It'll do that, but it's not going to do interlaced.
Can't we just kill interlaced? I know. It's a completely different story. Let's move on. Let's move on.
Hey,
Guys,
can I just say one more thing about the display, because I've actually seen both displays side by side.
Peter.
Yeah,
the
you're
next
one
thing
of
that I
the
wanted
few
to talk.
people in the world.
Yeah. Let's listen to Peter.
And I've seen both versions of the display side by side, and next to the £43,000 Sony monitor, and there is no difference between the Apple display and the Sony monitor. I mean, I've looked at Sony monitors.
The resolution.
Well, just looking at them, but then when when the picture gets paused and you look at the amount of detail that you can see on the Apple display, it blows any other monitor away. And I'm not trying to be a complete Apple fanboy. I'm just saying what I saw. Now that was pretty incredible, especially with the blacks. It goes to the detail in the blacks is better than the £43,000 Sony BBM monitor.
See, that's crazy.
Yeah. But the other thing that nobody is really talking about, but I've seen it firsthand, is the nano etching on the screen. So the nano etching, the viewing angle of the screens, I would say you can go probably about like that, and you're not going to notice any light. They are bright like that. But if you go to the side, the nano etching, there is no reflection. So you can have something bright on the other side, and you don't see it. And then you're thinking kind of like, oh, there's something wrong here. Normally, a glossy display anywhere near a window or something like that, and it will kind of, you get all the reflections. The nano etching is pretty amazing, and I think that's one of the things I find great about the display. Listen, Apple are going to sell hundreds and hundreds of those things, because it enables everybody in the post-production chain, including maybe even in the video village and everything like that, to watch the signal in HDR 12-bit or whatever, instead of somebody at the end of the post-production line having the $43,000 Sony monitor in the grade. Now you're going to edit on one, so that you're going to be sitting there with the director actually looking on one of these while you're editing, with possibly really good media to look on it. I mean, I think they're going to sell loads.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Peter, I think. Sorry,
I just wanted to remind people that, because there have been people joining in after we started, and just to remind them about the dates for the Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit, which is what we are talking about here, and we're talking about stuff that we're going to be seeing there from November 8th to 10th, with a very small possibility of that date moving to 15th to 17th. So I would say you guys can start pre-booking your flights, but don't pay for them yet, as those dates can move. And registrations will be open soon on FCPXCreativeSummit.com. I just put the link there on the comments. Go ahead, Patrick.
Okay. One of the things that I think is interesting, Peter, is one of the biggest arguments that colorists have been making and conjecturing about the Pro Display XDR without having ever seen it, is that based on what they saw in the presentation at DubDub, that they believe that the ability to get accurate blacks per pixel is going to be nearly impossible because of the number of LEDs that are involved, right? There aren't nearly enough LEDs, so therefore you can't black out the right portions of the part of the screen, and there's not that much in the way of control over light at the pixel level, is what they were arguing. But it sounds like what you're saying is that your experience is that the detail pixel for pixel on the Pro Display XDR is actually better than that of the BVM X300. Is that correct?
Well, it is, because the BVM is what is it? It's UHD. So is it 3840 by whatever? Whereas the Apple Display is 5K. Is that right?
6K, 6,000
6K,
something by
6K.
6K. So yeah, you know, there's a lot more pixels. You know, having seen them side by side, a lot of monitors side by side, it is a wonderful monitor. And and that's what annoys me, the argument about the stand. It's just, it doesn't really matter. You are getting an amazing monitor for an amazing price, with or without the stand. Doesn't really matter. And you're going to see them crop up all over the place.
I'll buy the monitor with the stand before I buy the Mac Pro, for sure. I think the monitor will be more useful to a lot of people than the computer will be, because the thing is, the monitor enables you to start editing and delivering in HDR.
Yeah, well, a $43,000 or pound monitor is so completely absurdly out of reach for most people. So if you want to be a professional colorist and you're trying to be able to grade for a certain arena, broadcast or film, now that's somewhat achievable. I mean, 8 times more achievable financially anyway. So Peter's right. I mean, they're going to sell a ton of those things.
Yeah, and they've got those reference modes built in, so you can switch between referencing for P3 or Rec 2020 or for PQ or HLG. Oh, that's another thing I forgot about earlier, Felipe, is the other ridiculously annoying thing that you have to do when you're color grading for HDR is you need to be able to monitor both SDR and HDR simultaneously while you're grading, so that you know that the grade you're making will scale down to SDR properly without looking weird.
And how do you do that?
You have to have a video I/O box.
Okay, so you would say that probably, I'll put it in my video, you're probably going to be outputting through the XDR monitor your HDR signal, and through the I/O box you're going to be putting out the SDR.
Probably. That's probably what I will do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting to see also how Apple will support that in terms of preferences. If it's going to be something simple, we hope it will be, right? And then you're probably using an adjustment layer on top to do the transformation, or not? You're literally just seeing the grade that you're doing, because there is a transformation, right?
It depends on if you're doing PQ or if you're doing HLG, right? If you're doing hybrid log gamma, the hybrid log gamma signal is designed specifically so that the first half of the signal, the first 50%, is a standard SDR gamma curve, and then above that it becomes an HDR curve, so that if you're playing on an HDR monitor, the top of the curve will scale out to play back properly on an HDR monitor, and if you're on an SDR monitor, it'll scale down to play properly on an SDR monitor. The problem is you don't know what you've put into that above the 50% mark or below the 50% mark unless you can monitor it. So that's where having an HDR monitor and an SDR monitor, especially while doing HLG, is hyper important. If you're doing PQ, it's helpful, but with PQ, usually you grade for HDR and then you do a trim pass where you go back and regrade for SDR, and that's where you would use the HDR tools that's built into Final Cut. I would probably do it through a compound clip, because I use a compound clip to do all of my audio mixing anyway, so why not do my HDR to SDR transform that way as well. But yeah, you could do an adjustment layer if you wanted to.
Nice. We have a couple more people joining us here. We have Sarah. She's joining us from the Middle East. So I guess she is on some job there. That sounds amazing, and it's good that she's being able to watch us. And Logan, welcome.
I told you about her last week. We were having a conversation, Felipe.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, so she's leaps and bounds beyond where you and I are. So she's a good one to be watching.
Sarah, we have to talk. Okay, so
Can I chuck something into the mix?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen at IBC, and I
Man,
think
you're getting ahead of me.
Oh, sorry.
No, you can continue. Continue.
I'll go and play with my kids for 5 minutes. I'll come back in.
Okay, so let me repeat one thing before you get to IBC. Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit, a place that the four of us will be there, and a bunch of other Final Cut Pro 10 creatives, has been confirmed for November 8th to the 10th. There is a small possibility that date can move to the 15th to the 17th. So don't book your tickets yet, or don't pay for your tickets yet. If you can book without paying, great, amazing. But those are the dates. It's going to be in November. It will not be during Thanksgiving. It's before Thanksgiving, that's for sure. I think last year was like the weekend of Thanksgiving almost, right?
It was. Yeah, it was the weekend before.
So this year, not happening during Thanksgiving. And I hope I will see all of you guys there. And now we were talking about what we can possibly see there, besides having the amazing sessions, meeting a lot of people, socializing, networking, and visiting the Apple campus. We tend to see other stuff such as Final Cut Pro 10 update, new hardware. Guys, a couple of years ago, they saw the iMac Pro before it was actually selling, so they could see Final Cut Pro 10 working there with the iMac Pro. This year, we are speculating that we're going to see an update of Final Cut Pro 10 running on the Mac Pro at the Final Cut Creative Summit. And so they say Bay Area so far, Steven. They haven't pinpoint the exact location yet, but 90% certainty San Jose.
To say Cupertino, San Jose area.
Yeah, so don't fly
to
San Francisco.
The Bay Area is big. Yeah. So Cupertino, San Jose area.
Yeah, there, to Cappuccino and the other place. No, I'm kidding. So the other speculation is Red Cinema Digital and a few other informations keep on mentioning September date. In the very beginning, right after WWDC keynote ended, on the website for Final Cut Pro 10, there was something about in September that we would be seeing that update.
The Mac Pro on the website is listed as September.
The Mac Pro. It was the Mac Pro availability in September. Since then, it has disappeared. It doesn't have a date there anymore. But the CEO for Red, he mentions the new R3D that will be metal supported or compatible to be launched in September. And in September, we have IBC happening. So there is some speculation here of we could possibly be seeing a lot of those things happening in September. So Peter, you were talking about IBC.
I was talking about IBC. I obviously Apple don't have a stand at IBC, but Blackmagic do. If the Mac Pro comes out, is there a lot of mileage to have maybe Mac Pros on the Blackmagic stand, running other versions of NLEs are available, and maybe a couple on the Adobe stand or whatever that. I mean, I think you're either going to see the Mac Pro come out for IBC, or it might be held back for we'll see it at the Creative Summit, or you might be able to order it, but you won't get them, or they'll just be arriving at the summit. I mean, I really don't know, but it seems to me IBC is a good opportunity. And it's aimed at the pro market. So, the pro market does go to IBC.
And the 8K market.
They're not content creators. They're not vloggers. Some people do, but they're mainly broadcast and film guys. And that's the audience that the Mac Pro and the Display are aimed at.
Now, imagine the marketing strategy for this. People are going to IBC to see whatever new things that a lot of these companies are doing. Blackmagic tends to have the biggest booth, and then you have Adobe with a very big booth. Imagine if Apple is bringing Mac Pros to Blackmagic, Frame.io, Adobe. Suddenly they're stealing the show. They don't have a booth, but people will be going to those booths to see the Mac Pro. And the Mac Pro working on a real life scenario with the DaVinci, something loaded there. They showed a WWDC Toy Story fully loaded on a Mac Pro, right? So I think, although they don't have a booth there, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen. And once in a while, almost every IBC for the past few years, there has been a parallel event a few hundred meters away from the main convention center. And do you know anything about that, Peter? If it's happening this year?
I don't. I don't at all, I'm afraid. I've been out of that loop. I wish I did, but I don't. I mean, listen, at IBC there's Whisper Suites. Every manufacturer there has a Whisper Suite where they've got stuff in that they show to select clients. So, I mean, possibly even if the Mac Pros aren't released, they might be there, but your average person who turns up is not going to see them, because there's always kind of like, come to this or whatever. All manufacturers show really new stuff to really important clients at shows.
Okay, last call. I'm gonna get you guys one by one, and I'm gonna ask you two things. What are your final thoughts about IBC, Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, updates, hardware, what you want to see, etc. And then I'm gonna go one by one. Let's start with Gabriel.
Which one do you want me to start with? Well, okay, first of all, I don't really have a lot of opinion about IBC because I've never been. I think it's likely that the Mac Pro would be announced there or shown there, because that does make sense. Final Cut Pro 10 is just a tiny sliver of what the Mac Pro market is for. So I think reserving that for the summit would be kind of a wasted opportunity. And what's your next question? Specifically,
what you're expecting from the Final Cut Creative Summit this year?
Yeah, well, I was thinking while talking about IBC, and what do you guys think? If the Mac Pro and, say, Final Cut 10.5 is released at IBC, what reasons would you give to somebody else to still go to the summit?
Okay, that's actually a good question to bring.
And we touched on that at the beginning. It's the community. But, and being able to see Apple is great, and talking to the Pro Apps team is always pretty amazing. But, there's something kind of juicy about getting the privileged sneak peek look at this stuff. So if that was taken away from you at IBC, maybe some people would be less inclined to go, but I think they should still go.
Okay, what about you, Patrick? What do you think? Are you going to IBC and all of those questions?
I will probably not be going to IBC.
Oh, no.
But, oh, no, I know. I think I've only been to one, the one in 2017.
Yeah.
IBC is great. I enjoy being in Amsterdam. For me, this time it's just a matter of timing and money and that sort of a thing. But it's a fun event. It'll be interesting to see if there's a side event there like there have been in the past years. To Peter's point, I think that there will be some sort of Whisper Suite or something, there. But with the timings that we've heard from Red and kind of pseudo leaked on the Apple website, I think September is probably a good time to expect to see the Mac Pro. Maybe not hitting stores, but at least showing up at IBC. And if everything gets released at IBC, I think there might still be a chance to draw people to the Creative Summit if you've got some really juicy keynote, or maybe some story about a project that's already used those items in the wild. Like getting to hear stories from people who've actually used it would be pretty cool. So, no pressure on Jeff Greenberg.
Jeff, no pressure.
But Jeff Greenberg, you might have to come up with a pretty strong lineup to get people to come if they announce everything at IBC. And if they don't announce everything at IBC, if we don't see everything hit for the first time, then, we'll see what happens. But last year, even without 10.4.4, was it 10.4.4?
I think so.
It was still really cool to get to see, iJustine come and talk about how she uses Final Cut Pro 10, going to the spaceship and getting to see the AR version of the campus and getting to hang out inside of the theater at Infinite Loop 1. I think it's Town Hall is what they call that theater, maybe?
I forgot about that. In 2017, it wasn't built yet. So that's just another reason for me to go, is to see the spaceship.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of cool perks to going to the Creative Summit without it necessarily having to be around a launch. And if they've already launched a thing, then, who knows? Maybe we'll get to have some hands-on with it that you might not get to have if you didn't want to spend $12,000 to have the Pro Display XDR and the Mac Pro immediately.
I heard a whispering that only people who go to the summit will get a copy of Final Cut 10 with dupe detection. So there's that to consider as well.
It's a great long-running gag, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
I guess we're going to see a little bit more Australians there this year there.
Yeah, I hear that there's also maybe a scrolling timeline.
So people from the East Coast might go as well then.
People from the East Coast might go. Oh my goodness.
Amazing. And Peter, what about you? What you're expecting?
Oh, you are going to have to run through the questions again.
Okay, so are you going to IBC?
Good question. I didn't last year because it's actually quite hard to justify the costs, especially now that Amsterdam has turned the screw on Airbnb, and people can only let out their rooms or flats for a certain amount of time during the year. So unless you've got stuff booked already for IBC, it's expensive accommodation-wise, or you have to have a big drive-in and live somewhere out in the sticks. But half the fun about IBC traditionally is the fact that everybody meets up in the centre. You're in Newmarket or wherever like that, or in the red light area drinking afterwards. So I don't know. I think it's a hard one. It's even though it's probably the nearest capital to where I live, apart from London, it's hard to justify the cost because a lot of what I do now is online. You can see it online. Software updates you can see, etc. So 50-50, I would say.
What about the Creative Summit? Or do you have any expectations of what this event will be compared to the previous ones?
I have a big expectation of the summit is that I intend to win the raffle this year.
There is a raffle. Sorry, what? There is a raffle?
There was one. I don't know if there was one last year, so I didn't go. But somebody ended up winning some nice stuff a couple of years ago when I went. So I intend to have the winning tickets for those.
I don't know. In 2017, I won tickets to NAB, and they never contacted me about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
I guess
maybe somebody else.
Them.
I couldn't go anyway. Las Vegas.
Did they specify what year? It's not going to be.
That's true. Yeah, maybe they'll call me like on my 50th birthday. And,
yeah.
Okay.
But
well, you give me hope.
I think for me, the summit, it's a great opportunity to meet some really talented people. It's the usual suspects go. Steve Martin, Mark Spencer, Matt Storff. Sam will be there. Patrick will be there. Yourselves. And yes, there are some great sessions to go to. You're going to learn something because you've got really talented people who are. It's actually quite competitive to get on Jeff's grid. You've got to really sell yourself to kind of go. I've got this. I've got an amazing hour and a half of how to, do
Talking
something.
About grid, there is one thing that is bad about the Creative Summit. There are 3 sessions going on at the same time. So you may find 3 amazing sessions to see at any given time, and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And then you go into a session, and then you start seeing people tweeting about the other session that you're not in that is amazing there. And then you go there, and you start missing about the other one. I mean, that's the only thing that's bad. If the Creative Summit would be 5 days to have all those sessions, it would be great. But I mean, it's very tiring. It's just very difficult. So maybe come in a group, each one of you go to a different session, then you can start talking about what you've seen. I don't know. Yeah. It is crazy. There is a lot of stuff.
I think it's important to note here that the sessions are not recorded and they don't end up online.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a case of, oh, well, I'll just catch up with it in the week after when they're all published. They don't get published at all, and they never have done, because obviously people are paying, good money to go there and hear them.
Very exclusive in a way.
To hear them. And I mean, it's a bit like a club of people. And they all, I've been in some sessions where, they've stopped and talked, and somebody's come up with an idea right there and then. So when people say, well, I never knew that, and you find something, something that you never knew. I mean, the avocado roll, for example, or was it the banana roll?
The banana roll.
Yeah,
that's right.
Just being in a car park in the rain with somebody with a laptop out working, if you can put an emoji on a roll, just out of a fun comment that came out. So it's things like that. Great people to meet. You can pick their brains. Most of the Final Cut Pro team and the motion guys and everything go. So you probably will end up speaking to those at some point, and you can give some feedback to them. They're really open to hearing stuff and like to hear it, and very approachable. If you're into Final Cut Pro 10, motion and compressor, go.
All right. So Stephen Doyle is saying that the networking part of the event is actually great. And I think for NAB, for IBC, for Final Cut Creative Summit, for editors retreat that I haven't been, I think all of them, the best thing that there is the networking part. It's actually talking to people. It's that moment that you're going to share a beer with them and talking about other stuff that's not even editing, that you're creating those relationships. Because of NAB and meeting people like that I ended up going to Mac DevOps in Vancouver a few weeks ago. I was there, and it was a great event full of Mac admins, and there were people from Pixar, from Disney. So even though I was in a Mac admins group, there were people from the post-production area. LumaForge was there as well. Ray Barr was there. So it was very nice to finally meet him, because during NAB he was super busy at the Frame.io booth. So just the networking part is totally worth. So even if you are tight on money, I would say make yourself be there and be around, so at least you can hang out with the people after the sessions. You may not watch the sessions, but make sure that you're there.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but there's normally the Saturday night event, isn't it? That's open to everybody. I think it's something like $20 or $30 on to come along, but they have a little bit of a demo, tables from manufacturers and bits and pieces and stuff like that. So even if you can't make it for the full duration, that's worth going to, because you'll end up meeting the people. You'll end up meeting the people there.
All right, so there is not much more to talk about. I'm gonna just say my predictions. I'm probably the most optimistic one here, or the craziest one, because I have a little impression that Final Cut Pro 10 may come out earlier than we expect. And when I say that, it's not the major release. I think we still see another update before the major release. I think the full metal support might come earlier than Creative Summit. It's possible that we would see something in September that is metal supporting, so they can show it on the Mac Pro at IBC in the Whisper Suite. Or it could happen that during the Creative Summit there would be a feature update. So I mean, those are the things that come to my mind. I mean, it's not impossible. We just saw Logic Pro being updated just a couple of days ago, mainly to support more tracks like it was shown on the Mac Pro. Now, Gabriel, where can people find you online? How can they get in touch with you?
I don't really have any idea what my Facebook or Twitter handle is. I don't really use them for communication. You can find me through Felipe, because we have a podcast, Get a Grip, together. Otherwise, you can go to aceenterprises.com, enterprises with a Z. Don't ask.
Okay, so on YouTube, you can look for Get a Grip. And we have several hour-long shows there that we're talking with guests. Sometimes we're just talking between ourselves about workflows and stuff like that. So you may want to check that. Patrick, how can people find you and get in touch?
Yeah, 2 ways to find me on Twitter. One is through LumaForge, just at LumaForge. Is there an ink? There might be an ink. I think on Instagram it's at LumaForge Inc., but I think we're just at LumaForge on Twitter. And then me personally at JP Southern on Twitter.
And what you're doing right now, Patrick, I think you're working on a feature, aren't you?
Yeah, I got the scenes listed up there. In fact, I'll be working with the director a little bit later today on, I think, Reel 3 and 2 and 5, I think. Yeah, so working on a feature film and working here full time.
And you're doing some collaboration stuff there that I think we're going to be looking forward to hear at the Creative Summit, probably.
Well, we'll see if Greenberg is as excited about my workflow as I am. But yeah, we're using PostLab to remotely collaborate. So we've got the Jellyfish in-house, and whenever we're on set together, we're using the Jellyfish to collaborate and do our DIT stuff and update libraries in real time. And then whenever we're separated by physical space, then we've got 3 copies of the media. So the director's got a copy, my assistant editor has a copy, and I've got a copy, and we're using PostLab to collaborate. And I love the fact that the libraries actually lock. So it's, if you can imagine your library as a bin in Avid or in Premiere, now all of a sudden you've got the ability to lock and have proper permissions, and you don't have to worry about, there are all sorts of other collaboration tools I've seen in the past where you're like duplicating someone's library while it's open and then messing around with it and hoping that it doesn't break anything. And but PostLab just works, and it doesn't slow you down. The only process that takes any time is downloading libraries from PostLab. And that's not a lot of time, depending on the speed of your connection and the size of the library. So,
I guess
very
even if you
that.
don't have a session at a Creative Summit, people are going to be able to talk to you and know more about what you're doing there, which is definitely very interesting. And Peter, where can people find you? And
just before I say that, I think I might have twigged something about the Final Cut Pro 10 update. I just think Alex Gollner has to publish his diary of flights between here and December. Mm-hmm. And then I'll guarantee you it's just one of those dates.
Yeah, I think we are pretty much guaranteed that if Alex is on a flight that's longer than an hour, we might see something happening.
I mean, there's something about it. It's not just a coincidence.
Yeah, maybe he's getting an email from Apple and saying, "Hey, here are some tickets for you to fly around. Why don't you go fly around?
Quick, release it."
So he can't go digging around within the code and finding things for a few hours at least, right? Mm-hmm. That must be. I think
let's get him off our track for at least a few hours while we do our stuff. All right, so Peter, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me in a few places. I run FCP.co. The website, which is literally fcp.co. Also on Twitter, I'm fcp.co, so that's fcpdotco on there. Or you look at the hashtag, FCPX. I'm normally on there. My personal one's Peter Wiggins, all one word. Pretty easy to find. I appear on most social media platforms in one way or the other. I'm pretty sure you'll find me.
And you do plugins as well, right?
I do plugins, yes, Industrial Revolution, and I'm just working on finishing one off, which is really interesting. It's an update, but you know what it's like, it's the last 10% that always takes the time. So hopefully that'll be out in the next maybe week, 2 weeks, somewhere around there. So yeah, I'm kept busy. Awesome.
So you guys keep an eye on fcp.co for updates on anything FCP related. And on the plugins from Peter, they're going to appear there. Also, if there is any update on the Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit date, it will be on fcp.co as well. But just reminding you guys, November 8th to 10, with a small possibility of being 15th to 17th, but 8th to 10th is pretty much the date there. On FCPXCreativeSummit.com, you're going to be able to find the registration very soon. And you can find me on Twitter at Baez Felipe, B-A-E-Z, Felipe, F-E-L-I-P-E. And I guess that's it, guys. Thank you very much for taking the time watching this. Thank you for our guests here, Gabriel, Peter, and Patrick. And I guess I see you in the next one. Bye. And
My theory is